Welcome to Headstones and Microphones, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched, first-person simulation of history's most interesting people. I am your host, Calvin. While we've added some creative storytelling, our goal is to inspire your own study of these fascinating lives. Now, let's meet our guest. Today, we are joined by a man whose imagination took us to Treasure Island and showed us the duality of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Welcome to the show. For those who may somehow not know who you are you?
I am Robert Louis Stevenson, a teller of tales, a poet, and a bit of a professional wanderer.
We are so glad to have you. Let's go back to the very beginning. When and where were you born?
I entered this world on November 13, 1850, in the beautiful, albeit often chilly, city of Edinburgh, Scotland.
And what was your given name at birth?
I was baptized as Robert Louis Balfour Stevenson.
Is there a story behind your birth name?
There is. Robert was for my grandfather, a great engineer of lighthouses, and Balfour was my mother's maiden name. As for Louis, I eventually changed the spelling to Louis because my father had a particular distaste for a local politician named Louis. I kept the name but changed the look of it.
That's a classic family move. What was your hometown like growing up?
Edinburgh is a city of two faces, the stately, refined new town and the dark, shadowy old town. It was a place of mist, cobblestones, and flickering gaslight. It was very atmospheric, which I suppose seeped into my writing later on.
What was your family life like?
I was an only child, born to a family of famous engineers, the Lighthouse Stevensons. My father, Thomas, was a formidable man, but deeply loved me. My mother, Margaret, was devoted, but I spent much of my time with my nurse, Alison Cunningham, or Cummy, as I called her. She was the one who filled my head with stories of covenanters and ghosts while I was stuck in bed.
What kind of kid were you?
I was a quote-unquote sick room child. I had very weak lungs, so I spent a great deal of my childhood propped up in pillows, looking out at the rain. I was thin, pale, and had a very overactive imagination to compensate for my lack of physical activity.
What were your biggest fears growing up?
Oh, the night was a terrifying place for me. I had dreadful nightmares, pains of sleep, I called them. I feared the dark and the religious terrors Cummy used to describe, but mostly I feared being stifled or stuck in one place forever.
What did you dream of becoming as a child?
Aside from a hero in one of my own stories, I always wanted to be a writer, though my family expected me to follow the family tradition of engineering.
What were some of your favorite activities in school?
To be honest, Calvin, I wasn't much of a student. I was a champion truant. I preferred wandering the streets, observing people, and writing in my pocket notebooks. I was teaching myself to write by imitating the masters, which I found much more useful than Latin.
What was your first job?
I suppose my first real attempt at work was as an apprentice engineer in my father's firm. I spent summers at lighthouse sites like Wick and Anstruther, but I spent more time looking at the waves than the blueprints.
Was there a moment where you realized you were different from everyone else?
It was during my university years. While my peers were focused on their law degrees or engineering, I was wearing a velvet jacket, growing my hair long, and frequenting the less respectable parts of Edinburgh. I realized I couldn't live the quiet Victorian life expected of me.
What's a decision that changed everything for you, but felt small at the time?
Going to France in the mid-1870s to improve my health. It seemed like a simple trip for the air, but it was there, at an artist colony in Grez, that I met Fanny Osborne. She was American, married, and had children, and I fell completely in love. That changed the entire trajectory of my life.
What was your biggest break?
Treasure Island! It started as a map I drew for my stepson Lloyd on a rainy day in Scotland. I began writing the story to entertain him, and when it was published, it finally gave me the popular success I'd been chasing.
What were your biggest struggles before success?
My health was a constant battle, and my finances were often in a dire state. My father and I had a terrible falling out over my lifestyle and my lack of religious faith, which was heartbreaking for us both.
Did you ever consider quitting?
Never. Writing was the only thing that made me feel truly alive. Even when I was so ill I couldn't speak, I would use a sign language I invented to dictate stories.
Were there any specific daily habits or routines that you feel are essential to your success?
I wrote every single day, no matter where I was, on a train, on a ship, or in a sickbed. I also believed in the brownies of the mind, the little spirits that work on your stories while you sleep. I'd feed them a prompt and see what they gave me in the morning.
What job would you have had if fame never happened?
I likely would have been a very mediocre lawyer. I did pass the bar in Scotland, though I only ever had one brief and I didn't even get paid for it.
What was your life like before fame?
It was a life of, quote, bohemian poverty. I traveled through the Cevennes with a donkey named Modestine and lived in drafty flats in Paris and San Francisco, often wondering where my next meal was coming from.
How did relationships change after success?
I finally had the means to support my family and travel as I pleased. My relationship with my father mended before he passed, which meant the world to me.
Did fame bring happiness?
It brought freedom, which is a cousin to happiness. It allowed me to sail the South Seas and eventually settle in Samoa, where I lived like a king, or at least a very busy storyteller.
What was the downside of becoming famous?
The loss of privacy and the pressure to keep producing, quote, hits. Everyone wanted another Treasure Island, but my mind wanted to explore darker, more complex themes like those in The Master of Ballantrae.
What misconceptions did people have about you?
People often thought of me as just a writer for children because of Treasure Island and A Child's Garden of Verses. They missed the grittiness and the moral ambiguity I tried to weave into my grown-up work.
What's something people misunderstood about your life?
Many saw me as a fragile invalid. While I was often ill, I was actually quite adventurous. I traveled across the American plains in an emigrant train and spent my final years clearing brush and building a home in the Samoan jungle.
Tell me about a time when everything went wrong and how did you handle it?
My first trip to America to find Fanny. I arrived in New York nearly dead from the crossing, then took a train to California in terrible conditions. I was penniless and starving in Monterey. I handled it by writing. I wrote The Amateur Emigrant and kept moving until I found her.
Who had the biggest influence on your life?
My wife, Fanny. She was my critic, my nurse, and my fiercest protector. I wouldn't have survived half as long without her.
What was life like in your final years?
I lived in Samoa on an estate called Vailima. I was deeply involved in local politics and became a sort of tribal leader to the Samoans, who called me Tusitala, the teller of tales. I was very happy there.
What were you working on in your career before you passed away?
I was in the middle of Weir of Hermiston. I truly believed it was going to be my masterpiece.
When and where and how did you pass away and how old were you?
I passed away on December 3, 1894, at my home in Vailima, Samoa. It wasn't the lungs that got me in the end, it was a brain hemorrhage. I was only 44 years old.
What's a random fact about you most people have never heard?
I was an avid player of the flageolet, a small wind instrument. I wasn't particularly good at it, but I found it very soothing.
What's the craziest rumor ever told about you?
There were rumors in Edinburgh that I spent my nights in the lowest shebeens and brothels. While I did enjoy the company of all sorts of people, I think my reputation was a bit more colorful than the reality.
What was your favorite food?
I had a great fondness for a good Scottish kipper, but in Samoa, I grew to love the fresh tropical fruits and the local feasts.
What was your favorite book?
I adored the works of Sir Walter Scott and William Hazlitt, but if I had to pick one to stay with me, it would be the New Testament, not for the dogma, but for the humanity.
Tell us a story nobody talks about.
Once, while I was living in San Francisco and very poor, I spent my last coins to buy a toy for a child I saw crying in the street. I went without dinner that night, but the look on that child's face was worth more than any meal.
What advice would you give people chasing success?
To know what you prefer, instead of humbly saying amen to what the world tells you you ought to prefer, is to have kept your soul alive. Follow your own path, even if it's paved with velvet jackets and long hair.
Robert, do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you shared that you would like to share with the listeners before we sign off?
Only that life is a great adventure, and even from the sick bed, the mind can travel to the ends of the earth. Thank you, Calvin, for letting me tell my story one more time. It's been a grand romp.
That was truly fascinating. We've journeyed from the misty streets of Edinburgh to the tropical shores of Samoa with one of history's greatest storytellers. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, legends may die, but their stories never do. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.